Hey, today I want to tell you guys about my time as a school bus driver. I'm going to give you the backstory on why I did this and my own personal experience being in this profession. So without further ado, let's get started. So as I mentioned before in previous videos, I was a school bus driver before I started driving semis with Schneider. You all might be wondering, why in God's name would you do that to yourself? Well, let me explain. Firstly, we have to go back to the year 2022, which was a pretty bogus year for me overall. I got laid off from my job at Copart. My mom had to have surgery. I cracked one of my teeth pretty badly. I cracked the transmission on a newly bought Chevy Volt, and my Boston Terrier that I owned since 2019 passed away due to a seizure. I was also going through it financially to the point where I started falling behind in bills. I'm still trying to recover till this day. Inflation has been giving me the belt, not gonna lie. This goes back to the layoff from Copart. You can say the layoff from Copart was a major lead up to my current day trucking journey. I got laid off from every full-time job I've worked, so something in my soul told me it was time for some type of change. But after I got laid off, I collected unemployment for about 2 months. Then I got hired at Valvoline Oil, where I was a car wash attendant. I worked the automatic wash, hand washing, and details. The gig wasn't too bad, especially since we were getting tips, which were really good. I was pulling close to $200 in tips every week. I worked with 3 guys that were complete characters. One was a wigga that had aspirations to have sex with a black chick. Another one was a white, nerdy 22-year-old that had a juice-rolled obsession. I swear his voice sounded just like Neil Goldman's from Family Guy, but a little more deeper. Then you have, matter of fact, I'm gonna shout Bro's YouTube channel out so you all can identify the guy. His channel name is RVW King. He discusses various topics and does reviews. But anyways, my time at Valvoline had to be short just off the fact the money was not doing it for me. I was there from July to November. As the days got colder, my hours got shorter. I would be in the car wash just sitting around, waiting for a car to clean, only for the manager to send me home early. I would DoorDash a little bit after work, but I found it not being real sustainable. After a while, I just didn't show up because it wasn't any point. Turns out though, I left on time because new management came through and got on people's ass. They damn near got to clearinghouse completely, but I knew something had to change. I needed another trade. I say another cause, I was previously a welder. I stopped doing it because the gig where I was welding laid me off during COVID. Plus, I didn't even like welding for real. When I was 21, I did the whole state grant thing to go through the welding training, but in hindsight, I probably should have just went into trucking then. I found welding to be tedious, boring, and a tad bit depressing. So with me going through financial struggles and hardship, I would drive around and see ads of school bus drivers needed in my area. Around this time, there was a heavy school bus driver shortage for obvious reasons. I would see the starting wages of 20 plus an hour and be intrigued. Also, the fact that they'll pay while training you seemed like a sweet deal. Only thing, of course, was having to manage the students. Figured I'd cross that bridge when it was time. My primary goal was to get a CDL because I knew having that meant lucrative opportunities. So now it's late November and I'm now fully committed to being a school bus driver. I passed the knowledge, passenger, and school bus portion of the test you take at the BMV, and I got my required TB test. All I had to do now was train on my skills and driving. My trainer was great, I must admit. Was totally relatable and made the pre-trip easy to remember. Had my properly mounted and secure game tight. For those who don't know, the CDL school bus test has the most extensive pre-trip. You have to say a lot of stuff, and you have to properly demonstrate a student pickup and drop off. I got my license out of Indiana, so it might be different everywhere. But not gonna lie though, it felt really weird driving that thing. At first, having to watch that tail swing is crucial. And all those mirrors you have are important. I did not pass my CDL test the first try. What got me was the parallel parking. I never been so down on myself after failing that because I got plenty of repetition prior to test day. I completely forgot how to do it during the test, and I was all over the place with the bus. I did so many pull-ups I couldn't even count. The next time I took the test, I didn't play no games. I killed the parallel in one smooth motion. I didn't even use a get out and look to see if I was in the box because I knew I was good. After that, it was the driving portion which I almost messed up. There were multiple times where I was driving well below speed limits. The instructor asked me multiple times, "What's the speed limit?" Then he got real stern and said, "I'm not going to ask again, what's the speed limit?" So after that, I put a little extra on the gas because there was no way I was failing the test on the drive portion for driving too slow. Would have been too mad. But your boy ended up coming out on top. It was an amazing feeling. So now I got my license and it is officially time for me to be a school bus driver. But before I was put on a route, I needed 4 ride-along hours, I think it was, and to be trained on my route. The first ride-along I went on was complete chaos. The students had that bus too lit. They all were grade schoolers. The bus driver didn't say anything to them and just drove normally. Not gonna lie, when I seen this, I knew I was probably gonna have the same approach when it came to student management, especially if I had a bus aide. I already knew what I was getting myself into prior to obtaining the license. The company was primarily for the Gary School District. If you know anything about Gary, Indiana, I'm pretty sure you can imagine how these bus routes are. They have probably top 3 worst school systems in the state. I would hear over the radio the craziest stuff. I remember one morning where a bus driver was reporting how a parent wanted to get on a bus to confront a student. It got to the point where it became a student versus parent brawl. Police got called and everything. And this was around 6 in the morning. You would also hear the usual fights on the bus between 2 students at least once a week. It would just make you shake your head. Luckily for me, I was given a route at a school next door to Gary in East Chicago. Not too much better, but I was more than happy with it just off familiarity because that's where I'm from. When I first went on the ride-along for this route, I was more than pleased. The students were well behaved. They were grades K through 8. They say high schoolers are the best to have because all they do is scroll on their phones with AirPods in their ears, but I feel like you just get different type of drama with all age groups. You might not have the ADHD having 3rd grader that doesn't sit down, but you might get a back-talking, vape-smoking junior that likes showing out in front of the female riders. But I was actually given a bus aide as well, so I sort of felt the rest of the school year was going to be a breeze. I had about 30 students on my bus, which came with 7 stops. Forgot to mention that with me training to get my CDL through the company meant me having to stay the rest of the school year, which I thought was pretty fair since I started right in the middle of the school year in January. They had a sign-on bonus of $2,500. It was paid out in $500 increments. But back to the route, it went great for about a month, then things started to go left. My bus aide started to get into it with a student consistently, and I mean very loud shouting matches. The sit down right now, young man's, the shut up talking to me's, the I'm gonna call the police, the yo old ass stay messing with me's. It was just a mess. Mind you, my bus aide was a female black boomer who came up in the 60s and was completely out of touch on handling the young Gen Zers. It really used to blow me how she would go back and forth with this 8th grader from the school all the way to his stop. You all probably thinking, why didn't you ever kick him off the bus or write him up? Did that and it did nothing. Matter of fact, it did the opposite. It got my bus aide kicked off for the rest of the school year, but I'm not gonna lie, it might have been warranted. She used to say crazy shit to him that I don't want to iterate, and she lied about the student tripping her, causing her to fall when it was really my fault for abruptly pressing the brakes to pick up a student at a stop. That lie messed up all type of credibility. I think the kid told his parents about the disputes, which might have ended up getting her kicked off. I didn't miss those shouting matches at all though. Those shits were cringeworthy, but bro, when I tell you the behavior difference when you have an aide on the bus and don't is night and day. I felt like free lunch to these kids. The only time they behaved was in the morning because they were still tired. They were completely different children in the afternoon. I went through it all too. Extreme horse playing, objects being thrown out the window, a fight, etc. Forgot to mention too, I had a Boys and Girls Club route in the PM where I would take a large group of students to the Boys and Girls Club after school. The club was no more than like 4 minutes away from the school, but when I tell you they got their money's worth, they weren't even good when I had an aide. I tried the whole rewarding good behavior with candy thing. It actually worked for like 2 days, then my bus went back to being a field day. You all are probably wondering why didn't you take more disciplinary action while driving the bus? Because it was useless. I found myself doing a lot of write-ups for multiple students. Surveys have more impact than student write-ups. The school officials would just come on the bus and yell at the students and give them these hollow threats, like, bro, I did the same shit earlier. It worked a little, but the kids didn't really give a damn. When you work for a company and not a district, Each kid is basically a dollar sign. The fewer kids that are on the bus, the less money the company makes from what I heard. So it makes sense they're not really going to kick kids off for real, unfortunately. It seemed like the students knew this too, but I just really wanted to get them to their stops as safely as I could. Don't get me wrong, there were plenty of times where they would go too far and I would pull the bus over and wait for them to settle down. The only thing about doing that is I felt it would be unfair to the students that actually behaved and wanted to go home timely, and I didn't really like doing this anyway because I didn't want them on the bus any longer than they needed to be. I would brake check the fuck out of them, which is something you shouldn't do, but I did when they really used to go real crazy. There were times where they would get me out of my body and I would yell at them. It would have them scared because I was always quiet, so me yelling would be a big shock to them. The year when I had returned for a full school year, I implemented a seating chart, which I felt had my bus in order for a while. Only thing is the kids would tell on each other a lot when they weren't in their assigned seats. It would be pretty annoying. I wouldn't pull off until everyone was in their right seats. What was crazy to me was how I had a lot of siblings on the bus and how it seemed like there was no togetherness with them. What I mean by that is like the older siblings would just let their younger siblings act any type of fool or just flat out forget they're on the bus. I don't know, I just feel like the older siblings should take on a more responsible role with their younger siblings. I mean, you should be pretty embarrassed if your little brother or sister is cutting up on the bus. Representation can go a long way. Quick story, I remember when the kids came back from a zoo field trip, I had a little second or third grader get on the bus who was a little sibling of like 5 kids with one of those hydration backpacks where you can drink water through a tube that leads up to the backpack. So as I drive and get through 2 stops, I feel taps on my shoulder and hear, "Mr. Bus Driver, I peed on myself." Blew me. Mind you, I'm driving and the bus is moving. I see his pants were soaked and were dripping pee on the bus floor. He just stood there as if he was waiting for me to pull out a fresh pair of pants or something. I just told him to sit behind me to prevent any more trails or puddles. But it goes back to the siblings. If my little brother or sister did this, I'm embarrassed as hell. And as a big sibling, why the hell didn't you make sure he peed before he left the school knowing he was drinking water all day? But second or third grade is too old to be peeing on yourself, to be honest. But now I want to speak on the parent aspect of it and if I had any rough encounters with them. And for me, fortunately, I never really have. Ironically, that was a perk of having older siblings on the bus. You don't have to wait on parents at bus stops for the real little ones, because the older siblings are conveniently on the bus to go home with them. For the little ones I did have without siblings, the parents were on time for the most part. However, it was one time where a student on my bus got an allergic reaction to eating peanut butter, and a parent got upset with me for not calling 911. The student did have an EpiPen, but I guess it wasn't working how it should. I just tried to get through the route quickly to try to get her to her stop. When I got to the stop, the parent actually got on my bus, which is something you're not supposed to do at all as a parent, and asked me why I didn't do this and that. He said he was going to call the bus company on me. You can say he was a little upset. I tweaked though. I was supposed to close my door before he had a chance to get on my bus, but he came in fast as hell, smelling like Newport cigarettes. I didn't really know how to react, to be honest. I really thought I was doing the right thing by driving because I felt like I could have got her home quicker than what the ambulance would have come, because it wasn't like I was far from her stop anyway. And I don't know anything about allergic reactions. Bus companies really don't train you for situations like that. They don't even CPR, certify us. But my dumbass probably should have just called it in and see what dispatch would have want me to do. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. This job did have some things I liked. The split shift thing was pretty cool. You drop them off at school in the morning, come back to the yard to clock out, have like 7 hours to yourself until it was time to pick them up in the afternoon, which I always dreaded. Remember, they are at peak form after 2 p.m. I would always have the bubble guts on my way to the school, thinking to myself how crazy I was for being in this profession. But it feels absolutely amazing when you get them all off your bus. It's like being able to breathe again after being suffocated. When it came to those middays, I was always the one to go home and take a nap in that between time. Especially around the time when I was working on the dock at Yellow Freight. That rest was needed. Also, there were some parents who actually showed appreciation. There were times where I got cards with money, and I actually got a gift bag loaded with goodies. It really made me feel appreciated. Not only that, but just seeing the kids actually saying thank you after getting off and seeing them smile was cool as well. I can say I had a decent relationship with the students. Of course, I had those times where I had to push up on them, but when they were good, it was a real cool job to do. They never called me out of my name or anything. I knew them all by name and gave them fist bumps on occasion. The respect was there a little. You do get a sense of purpose from being in this profession. But even with that being said, I don't recommend just anyone to do this at all. I feel like there are definitely certain qualities you have to have: thick skin, leadership, safety oriented, and it helps if you're a parent already having experience with children. Don't jump in this trying to chase a check or with alternative motives like me. I promise you, you're not going to think it's worth it, especially if you really have some off-the-chain students. Imagine too, my students were hard-headed as hell, but were actually not that bad compared to students on other routes. So yeah, you really have to nip everything in the bud early and often. You have to stand on everything you say because the kids will indeed do what you allow. Reward good behavior when you can. It does help. I was the type that came through with treats on holidays. At the end of the year, I did them right with chips and Capri Suns, just because. Don't do it too often because the kids will always ask if they can get candy or whatever. Not gonna lie though, if you have a really sweet route where you can legit just drive and go stop to stop with zero drama, you hit the jackpot damn near. It's really free money at that point. Speaking of money, it wasn't really any in it, to be honest. My first year, I only saw $19 an hour with like 25 hours a week. The next school year, I saw $24 an hour with the same hours. I can admit that 24 was pretty fair. When calculated the dollar per mile I was running, I came up with $1.50 per mile. I would see at most like a $450 check a week. The company I worked for lost contracts in the middle of me being there, so the money really dried up, which made my decision to go for my CDLA even easier. Not to mention me having an air brake restriction on my license definitely sealed my fate. Be mindful of the company or school district you go with too. Just know your coworkers are going to mostly be old or middle-aged women that are nosy and gossipy. They don't mind going to management and telling on you too. I used to hate having to come back to the yard to clock out because the vibe always felt messy going inside the building. And the old men there weren't no better. A lot of them were looking to trick off on the young female drivers. The rumors I used to hear from this one bus aide I talked to were wild. I always speed walk to the clock out thing, then go right to my car to go home. Didn't want nothing to do with that nonsense. But it's definitely different everywhere. I know my company had contracts with UPS where you pick up or drop off workers to the warehouse for their shifts. Some companies have more charters or field trips to sign up for. I never voluntarily did field trips. Those shits gave me anxiety. We would run like a convoy thing where all the drivers follow each other from the school to the destination, and at times it would be hard to keep up. It was one time where I completely lost track of the other buses coming from medieval times. I had pulled out my GPS and it had me go the longest way back going through heavy Chicago traffic downtown. Kids were talking trash and everything, saying stuff like, "I think the bus driver is lost," or "I'm going to grow a beard before we get back to the school." Sort of funny. That's another thing too, it would be jam-packed on the bus. I'm talking filled to the brim. Of course there would be chaperones, but still. And the kids would leave the bus a complete mess. Pretty annoying. But yeah, I hope this video gave you all a perspective on being a school bus driver. Me personally, 1 out of 10, don't recommend. You walk such a fine line doing a job like this. The students aren't held accountable at all for the shit they do on the bus for real. Like bro, there's freaking 4K cameras on these buses watching them the whole time and they don't get utilized like they should. I guarantee if they sent footage of these kids doing these TikTok dances and doing Jeff Hardy impersonations off the seats on the bus to parents, they probably wouldn't do half the shit they do. The only time they pull tape is for fights or when we, as the bus drivers, are being accused of something. It's insane. Also, the repercussions they do face are pretty laughable. The bus aide co-worker I used to talk to there had a kid actually punch her in the face, causing her nose to bleed, and all he got was a 2-week ban from the bus. His little ass should have been banned the rest of the school year. Let an aide or bus driver put his hands on a student. Their career is going to be done and possibly face charges. It's a pretty serious profession where you walk a fine line. You're captain of a ship that weighs 20,000 pounds with people's children in it. It can get real for you. I know I was playing around about the kids going crazy on the bus, but that is really no joke. If a cop pulls you over and the kids are in the bus treating that bitch like a jungle gym, you can get a ticket for child endangerment for each kid that's tweaking. Forgot to mention about little Antoine that stays up till 1 a.m. playing Fortnite and falls asleep on your bus. If you don't wake him up and you accidentally bring him back to the yard, your ass is grass. You're going to acquire some jewelry for both wrists and a ride that ain't Uber. Always made it a habit to check my bus before I pulled off. Hell, I'd check underneath the seats for extra precaution just in case, because I'd be damned if I get a misdemeanor for bringing a kid back to the yard. That shit sounds goofy. That's why I feel like that juice just isn't worth that squeeze. All the risk is not worth the disgusting $19,000 a year. It just isn't. And it's sort of crazy to say that because the job itself is extremely easy once you get comfortable with the bus and route. At that point, it's literally just if the kids are going to make you earn your keep with their behavior. But I can't talk too much trash because I did get a CDL out of the deal. Many companies don't offer that. I can also say it definitely made me have more respect for commercial vehicles on the road and just safety overall. After doing this, I can definitely say I don't want to transport humans of any age. I actually gave running CTA in Chicago or Greyhound a thought, but I heard too many negatives and horror stories. No way I'm going to jump out of a burning building just to land in a sea of sharks. But a lot factors in when it comes to school bus driving being for you. I can definitely admit it was not for me. The experience was cool, and just being able to say I completed a school year and a half feels a little rewarding. I'm a firm believer that this job is for someone who puts the kids first and your other reasons next. Low-key feel like this is a job for someone who is retired, who already has bread from a previous gig, or one who has primary income doing something else. Doing this as your only source of income in 2025 is crazy, especially if you're like me and don't do charters. The work-life balance is second to none, though. It can really be good for a young college student who is community or doing online classes. You get all holidays, weekends, those seasonal breaks, and random days off where the teachers have those meetings. And, nowadays they get all types of snow days. A lot of times it'll just be too cold and they won't have to go. Lucky little mofos. Can't lie though, our lake effect cold is different. But I hope this gives you perspective if you ever think about doing this. Basically, it's what you make it with the students waiting to break it. Salute to all the bus drivers who put years into this. Y'all are real life heroes. But that's all I have for this one. It's more I could say, but I don't want to make this longer than what it is. Be safe, stay blessed, and see you in the next one.